And I think we are ready. Yafa. Reading from the Bavli in Brachos on Daf Tes Zayin. Bez. Tan Rabbanan. Ein koran avos ela l'shlosha, ve'ein koran imos ela la'arba. It is forbidden to refer to people as avos, with the exception of the three. Ela l'shlosha, Rashi, Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yakov, la'afuke shvatim. This is coming to exclude the shvatim. The children of Yaakov are not called avos, meaning that's the cutoff point, and specifically coming to exclude the shvatim. Vein currently mos el arba, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, V'Leah. My timer. What is the reason for this? Ad hacha chashivei, tvei lo chashivei. Through those first three generations, they have chashivus, and from then on, they do not have chashivus. Tanya, the Brisa continues. The Gemara is quoting here Brisos that are brought in the context of Maseches Smachos, which deal with Hilchos Avelus. The context is that depending on the closeness of the relative, so we treat the Avelus process differently. Not all Avelus is meant to be treated the same in Halacha, and it says that even if people have close associates of their family, like live-in servants, for example, you're not meant to do certain rituals that indicate that this person was part of your actual family. It should be clear that they are not biologically related to you. And this is what the Brisa says, commenting on this specifically. Avodim u'shvachos ein koran osam abba ploni ve'ima plonis. It's important that the children do not refer to these people as abba and ima, because we don't want there to be confusion in that department. You know, it's customary in Klal Yisrael when there are families that, for example, where there's a stepfather or a stepmother, so the person refers to that individual not as Abba and Ima, but rather their first name and then Abba, like Abba David or Ima Sarah, something like that. This is in order so that it should be clear what exactly the relationship is. Ask the Gemara. B'shel Rabban Gamliel hayu koran osam Abba Ploni ve'Ima Plonis. In the house of Rabban Gamliel, they would refer to the servants as Abba and Ima. What is this referring to specifically? In the house of Rabban Gamliel, they would refer to the servants as Abba. Which Eved specifically? The famous Tevi from the house of Rabban Gamliel, probably the most famous servant in history. Right? So they would refer to Tevi as Abba Tevi. So says the Gemara, Maisa Listor, is the Brisa bringing a story in order to contradict what it just said 2 seconds ago, that you should not refer to the servants as Abba? So says the Gemara, Mishum de Chashive. There, it was different because they were Chashuv. Meaning in the same way that the Gemara just said that we only refer to the Avos, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, as Avos because they were Chashuv, Mikan de'elach lo Chashive. So similarly, this can be applied in the context of the servants or the maidservants in the house of Rabban Gamliel or some other household. If they're choshev, then it's permitted. And coming now to the conclusion of the Yosef Hatzadik saga and wrapping up this very, very difficult story of the family of Avram Avinu, and coming to some type of reconciliation. There's some very interesting things to point out in terms of the journey of Yosef, because really the journey that we've been following this entire time has really been the journey of Yosef, and for sure there's participation of other characters. Yehuda has his own transformation, of course, but really when we look at the character of Yosef, Yosef is a very, very unique character, and I want to delve into this by analyzing some psukim that are very, very well known. But I think the message that's trying to be communicated in these psukim is often overlooked. And I'm referring to the very famous blessing that Yaakov gives to the children of Yosef, which, as the pasuk says explicitly, becomes the archetypical blessing in which parents give to their children. And it's from Perek Memches Pasuk Hey. Yaakov says to Yosef, "Ata shnei banecha hanoladim lecha be'eretz Mitzrayim ad bo elecha Mitzrayim malihem." The children that you gave birth to in Mitzrayim, they are like mine, meaning they are like my children. Ephraim and Menashe, Reuven and Shimon Yuli. Ephraim and Menashe have the same status as Reuven and Shimon. And if you have any other children after Ephraim and Menashe, they'll just be regular children, as if they're the children of Shvatim, the next generation. Yaakov calls for his grandchildren to bless them, but he can't recognize them. And he asks Yosef to identify them. Now, the famous psukim that are given over as the blessing to the children of Yosef, Hamalach hagoel osimi kolra. Yivarechas ha'anarim v'yikarei v'hem shemi. V'shem avosai Avram Yitzchak. They should have my name, the name of Yaakov, and the name of Avram and Yitzchak. The name of the Avos should be called upon them. V'yidgu larov, and they will fish to a multitude. V'yidgu is the word dag, the noun dag, transformed into a verb. V'yidgu, they will fish. Not fish like to go catch fish, but they will be as fish. B'kerev ha'aretz, on the land. Now, if you were to ask the average person, these are very, very well-known psukim, who is this being directed to? This statement of Yaakov, who is this being directed to? This blessing of Yaakov. Who's he giving it to? He said very clearly, it's being given to Ephraim and Menashe. There they are, they're standing right in front of them. He has his hands on top of them. It even says that he rearranges his hands very intentionally in order to have the right hand on the right kid. Clearly, they're the ones being blessed, and indeed, he says to them, "Kachem no'elai v'avarchem, bring me your children, and I will bless them." So clearly, the content of the blessing is going on the children of Yosef, Ephraim and Menashe. However, this is explicitly against what the pasuk says in the introductory verse right before Hamalach hagoel osi. Hamalach hagoel osi is pasuk tes Zayin. What's pasuk tes Vav? Vayivarech es Yosef vayomar. He blesses Yosef, saying the following. How is this blessing Yosef's blessing? Indeed, there's like multiple contradictions. In the start of the scene, we see that Yaakov is saying, "Kachem no'elai v'avarchem, bring them to me, I will bless them." The next pasuk it says, "Vayivarech es Yosef vayomar." He's now going to bless Yosef. Okay, so we should be expecting a blessing to be delivered to Yosef. And then the next pasuk it says, "Yivarechas hanarim v'yikarei b'hem shemi." They should bless the lads, meaning Ephraim and Menashe. So who is this blessing being given to? The secret of this blessing, of course, the content, the words that are being given are being directed to Ephraim and Menashe. V'yidgu, they should multiply like fish. Yivarechas hana'arim. Clearly the content is being delivered to the children. However, the fact that Yaakov is giving a blessing to Ephraim and Menashe is also Yosef's blessing. Why is that? Not just because, well, if my children receive something, I also benefit from that. That's not the reason. Something more specific. If Yaakov is blessing Yosef's children, then what does that mean Yosef's children are? That was said explicitly two psukim ago, right? Ephraim and Menashe, Reuven and Shimon Yuli. They're going to be like Reuven and Shimon. What's the nafkamina, as we would say? The nafkamina is they get blessings, along with the other Shvatim, who are also about to get blessings. If Ephraim and Menashe are Shvatim, what does that make Yosef? In Av. The blessing to Ephraim and Menashe, while the content is directed to Ephraim and Menashe, ipso facto, it's Yosef's blessing. Because now Yosef is being elevated to the status of an Av. That's why it's Vayivarechas Yosef Vayomar. Meaning, regardless of whatever is coming, regardless of whatever content the blessing is going to contain, this is Yosef's blessing. By the very fact that there is a blessing. The very fact that Ephraim and Menashe are getting a blessing, that's Yosef's blessing. Later on, in Yosef's blessing, because because he also receives a blessing. He's one of Yaakov's children. At the end of the parsha, when Yosef actually receives his personal blessing, we see this expressed explicitly. Misham ro'eh even Yisrael. Midei abir Yaakov, from the might of Yaakov. Misham ro'eh even Yisrael. He shepherds the Even, literally the rock of Israel. What does that mean? He shepherds the rock of Israel. Says Onkelos, Misham ro'eh av ubenin. Fathers and sons. How does Even mean av and benin? Think about it, Rabbi Osai. Think about it. If you have the word Even in front of you, right? You have the word av and ben in front of you, and you merge them together, it spells Even. Av and ben together is Even. Yosef is a very, very unique character because he plays the role of an Av and plays the role of a Ben simultaneously. He shepherds the Even Yisrael. He's clearly a Ben. He's one of Yaakov's children. His name is written on the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol along with all the other children of Yaakov. However, he's not quite a Shevet. When it comes to inheriting the land of Israel, there's no tribe of Yosef that inherits. No, it's his two kids get portions in the land of Israel. So from the perspective of Yaakov, Yosef is one of the Shvatim. But from our perspective of what Am Yisrael is, he's not a Shevet. He's an Av. His children are Shvatim. But Yosef is an Av. This dual characteristic of Yosef HaTzadik is already alluded to in last week's parsha when Yosef is brought out of his captivity and put into his position of leadership, where he's able to literally save the world. And it makes a note of what they call before Yosef as they're parading him through the streets. One might think, who cares what the Egyptians are saying as they're parading him through the streets? But the Torah does care, and it makes a note of what they're saying about this person. And the fact that the Torah is making a note of it shows that it's significant for us to know what they're saying. Vayikra lefanav, Paro calls before him Avrech. And there's questions about what exactly this term means. This could be one of the words, just at the pshat level. This could be one of the words in the Torah that is already etymologically related to other languages. For example, one of the better explanations of what this word means is that the word is reich, like related to the German Reich, like kingdom. Av Reich. He is the father of the kingdom. He's the father of the kingdom. Vayisimeni la'ov leParo. That's what Yosef says about himself. That Paro has they've made me the father of Paro. He's in a way the father of the whole nation. So Vayikra lefanov Avreich means that he's the father of the kingdom. The father in the sense that he's providing for all of Egypt. That's at the pshat level. Chazal say in Midrash Rabbah in Parsha Tzadi, Siman Gimel. Vayikru lefanov Avreich, that they call before him Avreich. Says the Midrash, Avreich, Av b'chochma, that he is a father in wisdom, v'rach b'shonim, but he is young in years. Av b'chochma, rach b'shonim. Continues the Midrash, Aval Nebuchadnezzar. Contrast this to another character that we find later on in history. Nebuchadnezzar, about him it is said in Sefer Yirmiyahu, he is called the Tifsar. Tifsar, Tes, Pei, Samech, Reish. What is Tifsar? That's also a conglomerate word. Tipesh b'chachma, he is a fool in wisdom. Vesar b'shanim, and he's really old. He's stupid and old. Yosef is wise and young. Now what does that mean? Meaning he happens to be very smart and biologically young, and Nebuchadnezzar happens to be an idiot and also very old? No, this is saying that there's two modalities going on, in which Yosef excels in both of these modalities, where Nebuchadnezzar fails in both modalities. Yosef is able to excel in the domain of Chachma, the domain of being an Av b'Chachma. Not Stam Chachma, Av b'Chachma. Yosef is able to live in that world of the world of wisdom. That is the job of the father as such. Meaning, to the extent that a person is playing a father role, they are playing the role of giving over Chachma. That is the role. And he is also Rach B'Shanim, that he is young. Young, Perush, that he is in the domain of doing. The Av is in the domain of Chachma, of giving over directive and giving over insight and giving over wisdom. And the youth is in the domain of boots on the ground. We see this at the very pshat level. It's it's really interesting to contemplate. Why is Yosef pulled out of prison and brought before Paro? Because Paro had a very disturbing dream. And he had 2 dreams in a row that seemingly are connected, at least thematically. He has no idea what they mean. And it's really bothering him a lot. And no one can help him. So he hears that, listen, there was this guy when I was in prison, he helped me out with the dreams, maybe he can help you. So out of desperation, they pull this kid, this Hebrew slave, out of the pit, and they bring him in front of Paro. And he gives them a good interpretation, and they like the interpretation. Excellent, wonderful. After he gives them the interpretation, what does he do? He jumps into a whole plan. And this is what you got to do. You got to get administrators, and you got to gather all the extra food so you'll have enough. What should they have said to Yosef at that moment? They should have said to him, who asked you? You're here to interpret a dream. I heard you're good at interpreting dreams. Let me run the country. I got that covered. That's what they should have said to him at that moment. But there's something unique about Yosef, that he comes across not only as a person that's able to be in the realm of Chokhmah, that's able to interpret dreams, prophetic visions, but he's also able to implement something in a practical way. He's literally, in Toch Kedei Dibur, the Av B'Chokhmah, of navigating the symbolic significance of Paro's prophetic dream, and also figuring out how to be Rach B'Shanim, how to implement it, how to do something about it. This is the unique character of Yosef, of what he's able to bring. Coming back to this blessing, which is given to Ephraim and Menashe, which as we explained a moment ago, is de facto the blessing of Yosef as well. V'yidgu larov b'karev ha'aretz, that they should they should multiply like fish. Very often this blessing is taken. What's the content of the blessing? Fish have a lot of children, as we know. Fish multiply a lot. They have a lot of offspring. So they should also multiply like fish. They should also have a lot of offspring. Okay, that's a nice blessing. You should have a lot of children. However, this is not what the blessing is coming to say. At the simple level, this is not what the blessing is coming to say. And again, Onkelos comes to give us insight into what's going on by adding 2 words to the interpretation, to the translation rather, of the pasuk. I closed the comments before, so you'll take my word for it. V'yidgu larov b'karev ha'aretz. Says Onkelos, V'yidgu larov kenune yama, nune yama, like fish of the sea, kenune yama, fish of the sea, which doesn't say in the pasuk, doesn't say fish of the sea, it just says fish, kenune yama, the go ara, on the land, the kerev b'nei anasha, amongst people. What is the blessing coming to say? It's coming to contrast the v'yidgu to kerev ha'aretz. Fish are able to multiply. Fish are able to have a lot of children. They're able to be very successful. But there's a catch. They have to be in the ocean. The second you take them out of the water, they're not able to be yidgu larov. In fact, it's the opposite of yidgu larov. They die very quickly. The blessing of Yaakov to Yosef's children is that they should be able to be vayidgu larov b'karev ha'aretz. That's the blessing. That you should be able to have the blessing of fish, meaning this ultimate abundance, regardless of the environment. That's the blessing. Kenune yama b'go ara. Yosef HaTzadik excels in this aspect. He excels in this aspect. I want to highlight something to you, which I was literally thinking of as I was writing to Yeshiva just now. There's a very, very interesting pattern from the beginning of Sefer Bereshis until now. We've discussed one aspect of this pattern. One aspect of the pattern is that time moves much, much slower. How much time elapses in Parashas Bereshis, give or take? How much time elapses from the beginning of Parashas Bereshis till the end? Forget I'm saying how long it took from, Vayehi Or until Adam Rishon, the billions of years. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying from the beginning of the story until the end of the story of Parashas Bereshis, how many years? The answer is about let's say 1400 years, because it's the time that Parashas Noach starts off with Hashem telling Noach about the flood, and from that until the actual flood is about 120 years. So let's say 1400 years, give or take. Okay, from Noach until the end of Parashas Noach is about another 1,000 years. Okay? Avram Avinu was born in the year 1948 Mibrias HaOlam. So Avram was already born at the end of Parashas Noach. Lech Lecha starts off when Avram is 75, right? Well, it was a long time. Let's say roughly 1,000 years for Bereshis, 1,000 years for Noach. Okay, and then in Parshas Lech Lecha through Vayera, we have Avram Avinu's lifetime, which is a few hundred years. Time starts getting slower and slower and slower, and then you get to the story of Yaakov Avinu. The story of Yaakov Avinu. Okay, so there's maybe there's 2 decades in Parshas Vayetze. 2 decades in Parshas Vayetze, but things start slowing down. That's one aspect of the pattern. The other aspect of the pattern is how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu is involved with the events. In Parshas Bereshis, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a character in the story. You're saying, who are the characters in the story? Well, there's an Nachash, there's Adam, there's Chava, and there's God. That's basically the 4 characters. In Parshas Noach, there's his sons who don't really say anything, for most of the time at least. Okay? And there's God. Those are the characters. Parshas Lech Lecha, okay, fine. So then the cast of characters expands. We have a few more characters. We have the 4 kings. We have Lot. We have the people of Sodom. But God is still very much involved. God is coming and talking to Avram all the time. By the time we get to Yaakov Avinu, there becomes huge gaps of time where HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't show up. Beginning of Parshas Vayetze, Yaakov receives a prophecy. As he's leaving the land of Canaan, he receives a message from Hashem. You're going to go out, you're going to descend into Golus, but don't worry, I'm going to be with you, and everything's going to work out. Don't worry. The next time that he hears from Hashem is as he's coming back, when he's supposed to come back to Eretz Yisrael. How long? What's the gap between the beginning of Parshas Vayetze and the end of Parshas Vayetze? 20 years. Meaning Yaakov is living for his entire sojourn in the house of Lavan 20 years without hearing a word from Hashem. We hear from Hashem, so to speak. We hear a prophecy from Hashem. We hear Hashem speaking at the end of Parshas Vayishlach, when God tells Yaakov to go back to Beis El after the Dinah incident, and he confirms his new name Yisrael, and then we don't hear from him again. We don't hear from Hashem from the end of Parshas Vayishlach, all of Parshas Vayeshev, we don't hear from him, all of Parshas Miketz, and only in the end of Parshas Vayigash does Hashem show up again, telling Yaakov, don't worry, go down to Mitzrayim, Ani eredim cha Mitzrayim, I'm going to go down with you to Mitzrayim, Ani alcha gam alo, I'm going to take you back up. And indeed, the next time that we hear from Hashem, later on in the Torah, is when Hashem comes to Moshe and tells him, now it's the time to take the Jews out of Mitzrayim. This is Hashem coming to fulfill the last time that he came to a person prophetically and said, I'm going to bring you down to Mitzrayim, and I'm going to bring you back up. And then two parshas later, essentially, Hashem comes back and says, yes, now I'm ready to fulfill that promise that I made to Yaakov. Yosef HaTzadik is very unique. He's a major central character in the narrative of the Torah, and he never hears Hashem speak. Not personally, Hashem doesn't speak to him directly, and not through a Navi. He does not hear Hashem speak. Okay, so he has dreams, very nice, he has dreams, but Hashem isn't speaking to him in these dreams. Yaakov has dreams, and he has prophetic dreams, but Hashem is speaking to him. He says, Yaakov, I'm going to do this for you, I'm going to do that for you. Hashem never speaks to Yosef. And what's very unique about Yosef is that we see that he is a super God-conscious person, probably more than anyone else in the entire Bible. Maybe David HaMelech is an exception. I would say the people that are clearly the most God-conscious, constantly talking about Hashem in everything that they do, to other people, are Yosef and David HaMelech. David HaMelech is a different story. We'll leave that on the side for a minute. This is why Chazal make the comment on the seemingly innocuous verse back in Parshas Vayeshev, Vayara Adunav, that his master saw, meaning Potiphar saw, Ki Hashem imo, that God was with him. Say Chazal and Medrash Rabbah, Rashi actually brings this in his commentary. What does that mean, that God was with him? Shem Shamayim Shgura Befiv, that he's constantly talking about God. Now I'm going to take this opportunity, this is relevant to what we're saying, but it's also relevant in general. This is a very, very important ha'ara, I believe, to understand in terms of how Chazal approach their commentary of Psukim. The Midrash Rabbah, all Midrashim, not just Midrash Rabbah. The Midrashim is the Omek Kapshat of the Psukim themselves. Where do Chazal get this from? That the verse Vayara Adunav Ki Hashem imo, that means that Yosef was constantly talking about God. The pshat is, okay, he's very successful. Everything that he do works out. So God is clearly blessing this person. That's the pshat. That's what it means, right? That's the context of the verse. How do they know that what he's really saying is that Yosef's always talking about God? So there are two reasons. Reason number one is that that's not what the pasuk says. It could have said the master saw that he was very successful, and that he was very competent, and that he was very talented, and therefore he put him in charge of everything. But it doesn't say that. It says Vayardanov ki Hashem imo. That's what the pasuk says. That's point number one. Point number two, which is just as important, I think more important, is that Potiphar doesn't know about Hashem. He doesn't know about Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Egyptians don't know what Havaya is. If you were to say an Egyptian Havaya, they would have no idea what you're talking about. What's this Havaya thing? And indeed, we see later on in the story, when Egyptians refer to Hashem, what word are they using? Elokim, Elokim. Even when Yosef speaks to Paro, he says, Achrei hodia Elokim lecha es kol zos, by God telling you this message in your dream. Right? Umemaher ha'elokim la'asoso. God is going to be very quick to do this. Was Paro thinking in his mind when they were talking about Elokim? Right? Paro also says Elokim. Acharei hodia Elokim lecha es kol zos. The fact that God gave you all this insight. Ein chacham v'navom kamocha. When Paro is talking about Elokim, are they thinking about the same God that we're thinking about? Clearly not. For sure not. They're thinking about Ra or Osiris or someone else. They're thinking about whatever pagan deity they're thinking of. They're definitely not thinking of Shem Havaya, the super conscious unified being in which all reality is contained in. They're definitely not thinking about that. So when it says that Potiphar sees that Havaya imo, Yud Kei Vav Kei imo, that's specific. It says, oh, what's this Yud Kei Vav Kei thing? That there must be something to this Havaya thing that he's always talking about. There must be something there. Like this is way above average success that's going on. There must be something about this Havaya that is unique over here. And Shem Shamayim Shagura Bifiv. And it's not just that he's constantly enunciating the name of God, but that enunciation of God's name all the time becomes ingrained in him and how he looks at reality. Lelokim Pisronim Sapruna Li. God has interpretations. Tell me your dreams. God has all the interpretations. Right? Esa Elokim ani yorei. Hatachas Elokim anochi. I'm not instead of God, he says to the brothers. I'm not in place of God. God orchestrated all of this. It's God, God, God. God all the time. Everything is God. Shem Shamayim Shagura Bifiv. And it is not a coincidence that Yosef, the character that has no direct interaction with Hashem, not through direct prophecy and not with a prophet coming to him and speaking to him, he is the one that Shem Shamayim Shagura Bifiv the most. Because he is the one that descends to the depths of this fragmented, constricted world and figures out how to make it work. He is the Av b'chachma v'rach b'shanim. I'll end off with a comment that's related to Inyana Diyama. And we're coming off now with the Chag of Chanukah. There's a blessing that we all make when lighting Ner Chanukah, and really it's just a slight deviation from the generic blessing in which every Jew, individual Jew or collective groups of Jewish people are meant to make this blessing when they experience a miracle or when they come to a place in which a miracle took place. Sha'asa nisim la'avoseinu. Either bazman hazeh, in this time, or b'makom hazeh. Person experiences a miracle, they need to make that blessing every time they come back to that place. I know someone who as a young girl survived the Sbarro bombing back in the early 2000s. She lives in Yerushalayim with her family, Baruch Hashem. Every time she passes that place, she needs to make that blessing. Her children and her children's children forever will make that blessing when they pass that spot. Sha'asa neis le'imi morasi b'makom hazeh. The Shari Tshuva quotes from the Igeres HaRambam, which means the Tshuvas HaRambam. B'shem Igeres HaRambam, shehager yochol lomar she'asa nisim la'avoseinu. That a convert is able to make the blessing that you did miracles for our forefathers. Ub'shem Or HaChaim, B'parshas Ba'alotzcha, sheger yochol lomar kol haseder ha'agada avodim hayinu l'paro b'Mitzrayim. That we were slaves to Paro in Egypt. He can say that. What the Shari Tshuva is referring to is the Igeres HaRambam, the Tshuva that the Rambam gave to Ovadia Hager. a Muslim convert that had a correspondence with the Rambam, and he asked him this question. He said, when I pray Shemona Esrei, can I say Elokeinu v'Elokei Avoseinu, Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov? Can I say those words? And the Rambam says you can absolutely say those words. Because when we say that Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov were our forefathers, we're not only referring to the fact that they were our biological fathers. Obviously, they were our biological fathers. But we mean that they're the avos of the nation. They're the founding fathers. Meaning their lives are models for us. They are the avos. And anyone who joins the Jewish people, they become your avos. And as the Gemara says, shiny Eved Shel Beis Rabban Gamliel, the Chashive. There are people, even a servant in the house of Rabban Gamliel can become chashuv enough that you call him Abba. When we say Asa Nisim La'avoseinu Perush, what this means is a generation or a time or a place in which people had a miracle performed for them, they become avos. They become avos. When we say Sha'asa Nisim La'avoseinu, that's what that means. That there was a miracle that was performed for our avos because they became avos. Through this experience, they became avos ha'uma. And in that generation, which was a generation of complete Mesiras Nefesh, it was an entire generation of Mesiras Nefesh. They knew they had absolutely no chance. And they did it anyway. They became the avos of Klal Yisrael. And that's what that means. And Yosef HaTzadik he's not the paradigmatic Av, because he's not one of the Avos. He's not Av, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. But what he is the paradigm of is someone who can make themselves an Av. That's what it's the paradigm of. He can make themselves an Av. And he can make themselves an Av not only and not only does he not distance himself from the practicalities and the applications of this world, but he excels at it. Because Shem Shamayim Shagura B'fiv. Implementing the paradox of V'yidgu Larov B'kerev Ha'aretz, that through Shem Shamayim Shagura B'fiv, that he's constantly hearkening back to the name of Hashem, he is able to make for himself an environment which is completely immune to whatever circumstances he happens to find himself in. V'yidgu Larov B'kerev Ha'aretz. Yosef was amazingly successful and kept his purity and kept his righteousness in the depths of depravity. And in a global crisis, he kept that. He kept it and he was successful. And through Shem Shamayim Shagura Befinu, we are able to make ourselves this reality of V'yidgu Larov B'kerev Ha'aretz. Chizku Yam Slava V'chem Kol Am Yachalim L'Adonai.